Political ideologies. Liberal ethics. Individuality is the same thing with development, and it is only the cultivation of individuality which produces or can produce well-developed human beings. What more can be said of any condition of human affairs than that it brings human beings themselves nearer to the best things they can be? Or what worse can be said of any obstruction to good than that it prevents this? Mill, 1963. This is not just a theory about politics. It is a substantive perfectionist, moral theory about the good. On this view, the right thing to do is to promote development or perfection, but only a regime securing extensive liberty for each person can accomplish this. Wall, 1998. That the good life is necessarily a freely chosen one, in which a person develops his unique capacities as part of a plan of life, is probably the dominant liberal ethic of the past century. Galston, 1980. Liberal theories of value. Main candidates for a liberal theory of value. Perfectionism. Insofar as perfectionism is a theory of right action, it can be understood as an account of morality. It is an account of rightness that presupposes a theory of value or the good. The ultimate human value is developed personality or an autonomous life. In economic terms, the pursuit of one and entails opportunity cost. Foregone pursuit which cannot be impersonally shown to be less worthy. There is no interpersonally justifiable way to rank the ends, and no way to achieve them all. Each person must devote herself to some ends at the cost of ignoring others. Pluralism. Values are many, competing and incommensurable, does not imply that they are somehow dependent on subjective experiences, but the claim that what a person values rests on experiences that vary from person to person has long been a part of the liberal tradition. Subjectivism advances the idea that the value of good is not determined by any inherent property of the good, nor by the amount of labor necessary to produce the good, but instead, value is determined by the importance of an acting individual places on a good for the achievement of his desired ends. The perfectionist, the pluralist, and the subjectivist harmonize on the following crucial point: the nature of value in such that reasonable people pursue different ways of living. To the perfectionist, this is because each person has unique capacities, the development of which confers value on her life. To the pluralist, it is because values are many and conflicting, and no one life can conclude them all, or make the interpersonally correct choice among them. To the subjectivist, it is because our ideas about what is valuable stem from our desires or tastes, and these differ from one individual to another. The debate about the reach of liberalism. Is liberalism justified in all political communities? In the Law of People's Roles argues that they are not. There can be a decent hierarchical society, which is not based on liberal conception of all persons as free and equal, but instead views persons as responsible and cooperating members of their respective groups, but not inherently equal. Rawls, 1999. Martha Nussbaum rejects Rawls' position, instead advocating versions of moral universalism. They claim that liberal moral principles apply to all states. Is liberalism a cosmopolitan or state-centered theory? A moral universalist, if ever there was one, argued that all states should respect the dignity of their citizens as free and equal persons, yet denied that humanity forms our political community. Thus, he rejected the ideal of a universal cosmopolitan liberal political community in favor of a world of states, all with internally just constitutions and united in a confederation to assure peace. Kant 1917. The aim of government in a community is to assure the basic liberty and property rights of its citizens. Borders are not of great moral significance in classical liberalism. Lomaski, 2007. Liberal interaction with non-liberal groups, international. Liberal political theory also fractures concerning the appropriate response to groups which endorse illiberal policies and values. These groups may deny education to some of their members, advocate female genital mutilation, restrict religious freedom, maintain an inequitable caste system, and so on. Mill reiterated his claim from On Liberty that civilized and non-civilized countries are to be treated differently. He insists that barbarians have no rights as a nation, except a right to such treatment as may, at the earliest possible period, fit them for becoming one. The only moral laws for the relation between a civilized and a barbarous government are the universal rules of morality between man and man. 1963. In contrast, under a new liberalism which stresses redistributive programs to achieve social justice, it matters a great deal who is included within the political or moral community. If liberal principles require significant redistribution, then it is crucially important whether these principles apply only with particular communities or whether their reach is global. Thus, a fundamental debate between Rawls and many of his followers is whether the difference principle should only be applied within the liberal state, such as the United States, or whether it should be applied globally. Rather than proposing a doctrine of intervention, many liberals propose various principles of toleration which specify to what extent liberals must tolerate non-liberal peoples and cultures. Liberal peoples must distinguish decent, non-liberal societies from outlaw and other states. The former have a claim on liberal peoples to tolerance, while the latter do not. Decent peoples, argues Rawls, simply do not tolerate outlaw states which ignore human rights. Such states may be subject to forceful sanctions and even to intervention. Liberal peoples must try to encourage non-liberal, decent peoples and not frustrate their vitality by coercively insisting that all societies be liberal. Rawls, 1999. Liberal interaction with non-liberal groups, domestic. The status of non-liberal groups within liberal societies has increasingly become a subject of debate, especially with respect to some citizens of faith. We should distinguish two questions. To what extent should non-liberal cultural and religious communities be exempt from the requirements of the liberal state? Liberalism has a long story of seeking to accommodate religious groups that have deep objections to certain public policies. The most difficult issues in this regard arise in relation to children and education. Over the last 30 years, there has been a particular case that is at the core of this debate. Wisconsin versus Yoder, 406 U.S. 205, 1972. Wisconsin versus Jonas Yoder, 406 U.S. 205, 1972, is the case in which the United States Supreme Court found that Amish children could not be placed under compulsory education past 8th grade. The parents' fundamental right to freedom of religion was determined to outweigh the state's interest in educating its children. The case is often cited as a basis for parents' rights to educate their children outside of traditional private or public schools. In this case, the United States Supreme Court upheld the right of Amish parents to avoid compulsory schooling laws and remove their children from school at the age of 14. Thus, according to the Amish, avoiding secular influences that might undermine the traditional Amish way of life. To what extent can they be allowed to participate in decision making in the liberal state? Arguments based on religious comprehensive doctrines may enter into liberal politics on issues basic justice, provided that, in due course, we give properly public reasons to support the principles and policies that our comprehensive doctrine is said to support. Rawls, 1999. Rawls allows the legitimacy of religious based arguments against slavery and in favor of the United States civil rights movement because ultimately such arguments were supported by public reasons. Greenawalt hold that even this is too restrictive. It is difficult for liberals to justify a moral prohibition on a religious citizen from voicing her view in a liberal political debate. 1995. Gauss and Valliere acknowledge an unevenness between the reasons to justify to another a law and the reason to reject a law. They argue that although a secular rationale is necessary in our society for a publicly justified law, it can be defeated by reasonable religious conviction without secular backing. Thus, citizens of faith would be able to preserve their religious integrity, all the while remaining unable to coerce others via unshared religious reasons. 2009.